I'm sure it comes as no surprise that just like a lot of you guys, I love an espresso martini. But what might be more surprising is that I actually very rarely drink them, and there are two main reasons for this. Number one, I don't want to drink alcohol in the daytime, and number two, I don't want to drink caffeine at nighttime. So number two, very easy to fix. We can make delicious decaf espresso martinis these days. But to address number one, today I'm going to show you how you can get your espresso martini fix at any time of day by sharing with you a non-alcoholic drink called the Espresso Shakerato. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I know what an Espresso Shakerato is, stay tuned because I've got some really important tips that you might not have heard before, which are critical for getting the very best results. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you 3 delicious variations on this amazing drink. So let's make the Espresso Shakerato. The Espresso Shakerato is a very simple drink in one way, but since there's nowhere really to hide with this drink, it's really important that you choose amazing ingredients and you take great care when you're making the drink. The Espresso Shakerato is also known as the Cafe Shakerato, which loosely translates as shaken coffee. Some people just call it a Shakerato, but it's not to be confused with a very different but also very delicious drink called a Campari Shakerato. So a Campari Shakerato, some people call it a 1-ingredient cocktail. All you're doing is pouring Campari into a shaker with lots of ice, really shaking it up till it aerates and dilutes slightly, fine straining it into a frozen glass and maybe garnish with some citrus. If you love Campari, I'd say there's a very strong chance you're going to really enjoy this drink. If you hate Campari, you're probably going to hate it. But at the end of this video, I'm going to mash these 2 drinks together, the Espresso Shakerato, the Campari Shakerato, to create a drink called, I guess, the Shakerato, which brings those really nice bittersweet notes, but also the nice foamy texture and coffee forward notes. So stay tuned for that. But we need to define what an Espresso Shakerato is. As I said before, very simple. We've got espresso, we've got some kind of sweetener, we've got some kind of seasoning, which I'll talk about later, and you don't really see these on cafe menus. I think the main reason for this is, although technically it's a coffee drink, it's an espresso drink, it doesn't follow the same general workflow that a lot of other drinks on the cafe menu do. So because you're brewing espresso, then you're shaking it up. This requires different tools, a different station, a different setup, and it kind of takes a barista out of action for a while because they need to prepare this drink, which is very different to everything else. So what I'm saying here is this is a fantastic drink. We should get the Espresso Shakerato back into everyone's lexicon. It's underrated. It's a really nice way to drink espresso, particularly in summer. So try these drinks, see what you think, and if you're a barista, why not add it to your cafe menu? As simple as this drink sounds, there are some really important things you need to know, some much less obvious than others, and some that I've not seen in any other references online. They can actually take the drink from not working at all to being really fantastic, a really nice and balanced way to serve espresso, and I'm going to share all of them with you today. So the first thing we need to talk about is going to be coffee. When I brewed my espresso, I actually went for a much longer ratio than I usually would, maybe a 1:3 ratio. Gives potentially some bitterness in there, maybe brings down the body slightly. But because we're adding the sugar syrup, which adds texture, we're adding some kind of seasonings to balance everything out, and we're shaking the drink up to emulsify it, there's still plenty of texture, plenty of espresso intensity in the drink. If you pour your shots to 40 grams out, maybe a 1:2 ratio, let's say, I actually find that when you fine strain this, which to me is very important because I don't like that kind of chunky ice, that you get such a short yield, you end up with a slush of ice in your fine strainer. So most people just single strain, giving it the chunky ice shards. I don't want to do that. I'd much rather get the extra espresso in there, a little bit of extra dilution, balance everything out with the other ingredients, and I think that's a much better way of doing things. I'm going with the Brazilian coffee. It's a pulp natural, chocolatey, nutty, some dried fruit in there. But you can experiment with pretty much any coffee here, as long as you're smart with the other ingredients that you add, which we'll talk about later. So I'm quite happy to have my espresso hot because I actually want that dilution in there. So I'm gonna go straight in with that. You can get away with going a little bit longer because we're not adding the alcohol that you would in an espresso martini, so we need that extra liquid. 3 key takeaways from this section. Number 1, choose a great coffee that you really enjoy. Number 2, brew it a little bit longer than you normally would, maybe 1:3, maybe 1:3.5. And number 3, brew it hot, brew it fresh, and that's gonna be a fantastic base. So now we've got our espresso, we can think about our sweeteners and seasonings. When it comes to sweetening an espresso shakerato, I like to go anywhere between 5 mils and 15 mils of a sugar syrup, and I'm just going with a straight cane sugar syrup here. I'm gonna go with just shy of 15 mils because I think that's a really nice balance. particularly for a coffee with more intensity or a slightly darker roast. If you've got a very delicate coffee, you can probably get away with adding a little bit less sugar. I'm using MONIN cane sugar syrup here because it's very neutral, really allows the coffee to shine through. But you can add flavored syrups, which we'll talk about later, and I'll give you 3 very different examples. So, sweetness, check. Now we can talk about seasoning. And this is a really powerful tool, which I talk about a lot. Most people think I'm going to talk about saline solution, which I am, because I always do. But saline solution isn't the only seasoning you can use. You can use all different kinds of bitters. You can bring forward those really delicious fruit notes in the coffee by using the acid booster, or you can soften everything by adding vanilla extract. But today, for this one at least, I'm going to stick with our saline solution, my trusty old friend, which again, I've said this a million times before, doesn't make the drink taste like salt. It just makes all the other ingredients pop, brings them together, and makes everything very harmonious. So whatever seasoning you're adding, I recommend going with about 0.5 grams, which we've done here. And now we can shake up the drink with lots of ice to get it really nice and foamy. Fine strain that into a frozen glass to get rid of any of those shards of ice. You could add any garnish you like, which we'll talk about in a second. But for now, let's taste this delicious looking, at least, Espresso Shakerato. Cheers. It's really good. I love drinking espresso. This doesn't feel like I've tainted it or changed it too much really. By chilling it down, it does, to me, need a little bit of sweetness. The seasonings have worked really nicely. The salt, I just think, rounds it out really well. You can't really taste it, but if you taste it without the salt, you definitely know this one's better. It tastes like the coffee in there, and that's exactly what we want. Cold, refreshing, foamy, creamy, without any dairy, and just a really nice way to drink espresso. So taking this template, you can really adapt it to fit any flavor profile you're looking for. I'm going to be using different MONIN syrups here to add different flavor accents to the drink, which I think is a really nice way to add slightly different flavors to the coffee, provide more emphasis to the flavors that you really like in there. And I've got 3 versions to talk about. First of all, I've made a cinnamon roll espresso shakerato. Choose a coffee with some slight spice notes in there, maybe some chocolatey notes as well. Combine this with 5 to 15 mils of MONIN cinnamon roll syrup, 2 to 3 dashes of orange bitters, because the orange really ties in nicely with the cinnamon flavor. Shake this up, fine strain it into a coupe glass or a Nick and Nora glass, and then I've garnished it with the dusting of cinnamon and some dried orange to complement the flavors that we've added to the drink. Next up, to make a salted caramel espresso shakerato, I combined, again, a similar espresso, quite traditional, with MONIN salted caramel syrup, 0.5 grams of vanilla extract this time, which really rounds out the drink, adds a subtle vanilla note, and then 40 grams of oat milk, which is totally optional. Some people would say this is getting into iced latte territory, but it's definitely an espresso forward drink, with the oat milk just bringing a little bit of creaminess and that silky texture. Shook this up, fine strained this again, but this time I served it on the rocks. I know some of you are conscious about looking like you're drinking alcohol in the daytime, which is totally fair. This looks much less like a cocktail. Just like when Dick Bradsell took the Espresso Martini, served it on the rocks and renamed the drink the pharmaceutical stimulant despite being the same drink. And then I garnished this with a little bit of fudge just to bring through those kind of fudgy, caramelly flavors. Really delicious. And then finally this one, the Shakerato, which is designed to mimic both the Espresso Shakerato and that Campari Shakerato. I've got a really fruit-forward coffee here. This is an anaerobic wash process from Colombia. Really delicious, kind of citrusy, very complex. 15 mils of MONIN Bitter, which is very similar in its flavor profile to Campari, but is non-alcoholic. And then half a gram of acid booster, again to bring out those really nice citrusy notes, some of the kind of floral notes in the coffee as well. Shake that up really hard, fine strain it once again, and we'll garnish with orange zest, just like you would for a Campari Shakerato. It really brings together the best of both drinks. The citrus is really clear, it's really nice and fruity from the acid booster, really kind of livening it up. MONIN Bitter brings that really nice classic aperitif style flavor. Great espresso, great foundation, and this is just a really fun drink. So experiment in the world of shakeratos. There's so much to explore. I hope you enjoy these. I hope you enjoyed this video, which is going to be the one that YouTube recommends you watch. Thank you to MONIN for sponsoring this video, and thanks to you guys for watching. So enjoy the next video, and I'll see you soon. I'm going to enjoy a non-alcoholic espresso shakerato. Cheers.